How's it going, Laser Bruce's up, Bobby Sixkilla. Welcome back to Shinrai, broken beyond despair. Now, after the last episode, my throat totally gave out on me, so I had to give up for the day and go to bed because I could not talk anymore. But because I hadn't solved the case, I couldn't sleep either, and I sat there mulling over the investigation in my head. What was I missing? Like, who could it possibly be? And then I realized there was only one other person that made sense. I think I might have this, but I guess we're going to find out. What did you try here tonight? Yeah, we're going to skip ahead to the choice. And I think, because we went with the obvious, right? Hero was the obvious. Runa was the main one that I suspected. But based on what we learned about Hero, the only thing that makes sense is that Momoko is the one responsible. I racked my brain all night last night without being able to sleep, because I hadn't finished it. I just wanted to come back and finish it, but I couldn't speak anymore. So, you know, because it was obviously staged, right? That was the plan with Hero. Hero and Momoko staging her suicide to scare everybody. But what if it wasn't Hero that had an ulterior motive, but Momoko that had the ulterior motive? I guess we'll find out. If I'm wrong, then I'm out of ideas. Huh? Momoko? Hey. Are you honestly telling us now that Momoko committed suicide after all? Yes. Come on, that's nonsense. Earlier you agreed with me that there has to be more to this than just a simple suicide, and now you say that that's exactly what it is? Besides, even if it was suicide, what does it change? We're talking about Carmen's guilt here, aren't we? And she's definitely responsible for Hero and Kotoba. Even you can't deny that. No, she didn't kill anyone. Are you for real? I honestly can't believe you. This is getting ridiculous. If you're telling us that Carmen didn't kill anyone, then what exactly happened here, huh? Someone's going to be the murderer, and I thought you saw her kill Hero yourself. So what the hell's this all about? I swear if you're lying to protect her for whatever reason, I won't forgive you. You better have a good explanation for this, as well as something to prove it. Otherwise... Wow, Taiko was getting kind of scary. He sure was pissed. Not that I can blame him, though. Not after what had happened to his best friend. Of course he wanted to know the reason for it, as well as to bring the person responsible for it to justice. However, his anger was blinding him, and it was affecting his rationality. Well, in that case, I just had to prove it to him beyond a shadow of a doubt. Prove to him that the real mastermind behind tonight's events was none other than... Momoko. Wait, what? Have you lost your mind? Just a moment ago, you told us that Momoko committed suicide, and now you're telling us that she's the one who stabbed Hero and set Kotoba on fire? How the hell does that work? Is Raiko feeling alright? Or did she hit her head too hard when jumping out of that window? Honestly, Shinpuku-san, that you of all people would say such a thing. Yeah, this really isn't the time for jokes, you know? And she ain't joking. She's serious. Right? I'm always serious. Well, I'm curious how you want to explain this then. It's actually quite simple. I admit that it might appear somewhat ludicrous at first, but it makes a lot of sense once you realize that all of us made one big wrong assumption. That Momoko died first. We wrongly assumed that Momoko died first, when in reality, she was the last one to die. Are you kidding me? She was the last one to die? Are you really alright? Basically what I'm saying is that her initial death during the first blackout was faked. She faked her own death? Yes, that was the only way everything made sense. Momoko had committed suicide, but she was also responsible for everything else that had happened here tonight. And the only way to explain that apparent contradiction was that she faked her own death, went on to stab Hero, set the basement on fire, and eventually committed suicide for real. While examining Momoko's body, it had struck me as kind of odd that we had found her hanging from the ceiling. After all, when we discovered her earlier, right after the first blackout, Hero and Carmen had gone into the guest room in order to get her down. So how come she was still hanging there with that rope around her neck? Maybe they couldn't get her down and just left her hanging there. It's impossible? Eh? Why is it impossible? I'd like to know that myself. I'm not just going to take your word for it, especially when it's about something so ridiculous. So I hope you can prove it. Of course I can. Actually, Baro-chan can confirm it for us. And so can Rai. Rai and I? Huh? What are you talking about? Yeah, what she said. I ain't got a clue what you mean. Think back when the three of us went upstairs in order to check on Hero and Carmen. What exactly did we see when we entered the room? There was Carmen sitting on the floor, and she was raising the knife to stab Hero. That's about all I could... Ah, did you realize it? Something was missing from that scene. Or rather, someone. You're right. Momoko's corpse wasn't there. Oh yeah. I mean, it was pretty dark and stuff, but I'm sure we would have seen a corpse hanging from the ceiling in the center of the room. Indeed. Back then, everything had happened rather quickly, and our attention had obviously been focused on the scene playing out in front of us. Still, in retrospect, I had this nagging feeling as though something had been missing from that scene. And now I knew what it was. Momoko. Of course, the most logical conclusion was that Hero and Carmen had lowered her body after all, and maybe put her in the corner of a room, where we wouldn't be able to see her. However, that would have been strange too. When Taiko and I had run to the second floor after hearing Carmen scream, Momoko had been hanging from the ceiling again, so... How was that possible? Had someone hanged her a second time? I admit it sounds a little odd, but we can't rule it out. It's perfectly possible that Carmen did it. I mean, we found her in front of that guest room. For whatever reason, she could have decided to hang Momoko again. No, I didn't. I swear I didn't do that. It's okay, Carmen, don't worry. I know you didn't. And I'm gonna prove it. Shimpuku? Mika still doesn't get it. Why is Raiko so convinced that Momoko is the culprit and Carmen is innocent, Aku? Didn't Raiko, Rai, and Nobara see Carmen kill Hero? Yeah, Mika's got a point. The three of us clearly saw it, so... But did we really see it clearly? Huh? Again, think back to what we could actually see. It was pretty dark inside that guest room, and the person in front of us was wearing a cape and a hat with a rather wide brim. Their face was completely obscured by shadows. I only assumed it was Carmen due to the clothes, but... Can you honestly say you were able to clearly recognize her face? I guess I gotta admit that I didn't get to see her face. It really was too dark. I didn't even recognize Hero until I stood directly in front of him. And now that I think about it, I didn't see Carmen's long ponytail when she jumped out of that window either, so... So you're really saying it was Momoko we saw there dressed up as Carmen? I don't know about that. Sure, we couldn't clearly recognize her face, but it doesn't automatically mean it was Momoko. While that may be true, you have to admit that it's at least a possibility. No, it's not. It would only be a possibility if Momoko actually did fake her suicide. But I say that's impossible. I mean, don't you think anyone would have noticed? Getting hanged isn't really something so easy to fake, and I thought you all saw her hanging there. Aku, Mika definitely saw a dead Momoko hanging from the ceiling. And Hero and Carmen even checked Momoko's pulse and confirmed that Momoko was dead. See? What you're saying doesn't add up. Hero and Carmen definitely would have noticed. Or are you proposing that Momoko also faked not having a pulse somehow? I have to agree. That just does not seem feasible. And even if you were right, Shimpuku-san, there are so many other things that would have been impossible for Mori-san to accomplish. Runa certainly brought up an interesting point. Fooling Carmen and Hero would have been hard enough already, but on top of that, we've mysteriously locked and unlocked doors, the dead reception phone, 2 power outages, arson, murder. I had to admit all of it sounded a bit too much for a single person to pull off. Yeah, how the heck would she have done that by herself? That sounds pretty much impossible. She had to have multiple accomplices, right? I'm guessing Hero at least. If it's impossible for her to do all these things alone, then it would be only logical consequence, right? I'd say this is getting ridiculous, but we're long past that. Well, how many accomplices did she have then? I want a concrete number, no vague estimates. Including her or not including her? 3? Are you serious? Including Momo herself, that'd be half her group. Seriously. Don't you think that sounds a bit absurd? No. She definitely had 3 accomplices. I can't believe I'm asking this, but who would those accomplices be? Shouldn't be hard to figure out if you go by the process of elimination. It's actually rather obvious, I'd say. Just to fake her suicide, Momoko already needed the help of 2 people, and naturally those 2 are the same ones who confirmed her death. Hero, and you, Carmen. Without you, it would have never worked. Yes, when we discovered Momoko after the first blackout, Hero and Carmen had been the only ones to get close to her. Mika and Runa had stayed outside the room, and Barachan and I had left to call for help. Ryan and Taiko had never even seen her back then. In other words, none of us had ever confirmed Momoko's death for ourselves. Just like Mika had simply taken Hiro and Carmen's words for granted. I had believed her when she had brought the news. You can forget about the phone now. Momoko is dead. That can't be. Mika, tell me that's not true. Mika doesn't lie. But if you don't want to believe Mika, why don't you go take a look for yourselves? Because of the second blackout, we never actually gotten a chance to do that. But we should have. Not confirming Momoko's death for myself had been an elementary mistake. Okay, I guess that makes sense, but who's the third accomplice then? If I consider the victims as well as what happened, and what Momoko, Hiro, and Carmen have been unable to do, there's only one other person who came into question. Katoba? Right? We got Hiro, Carmen, Momoko, Katoba. This is ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous. Why the hell would Katoba help you with that? Faking her death, killing Hiro, getting himself burned and blaming everything on Carmen? Why would any of those three help you with that? Don't you realize how utterly absurd this is? Come on, they obviously didn't know about Momoko's true intentions. She fooled them. Just like she fooled every single one of us. And how exactly did she do that? By telling them that it was just going to be a harmless prank, of course. A prank? Yes, the idea of a prank had been brought up on multiple occasions tonight. Originally, Ryan and Runa had wanted to play one on us. A rather morbid one at that, pretending one of them would kill the other. Thanks to Carmen, who had been involved in the party preparations, Momoko might have learned about that prank. After the first blackout, when I told Mika that Ryan and I wanted to scare us, upon our return to the dining hall, she had immediately wanted to devise a counterattack, in order to turn the tables on our host. Now what if Momoko had proposed the exact same thing to her friends? Playing a prank as morbid as Rise and Runa's on the rest of us, a prank that involved one of them dying. That's insane. Even if they had thought it was just going to be a prank, they would have never helped her with something like that. Especially not Katoba. Why not? Carmen was Momoko's best friend, so it's not hard to imagine she would have helped her. And you know what Hiro was like. Of course he would have been up for it, if only to prove he could play a better prank than Rai. As for Katoba, you said it yourself earlier. He's in love with Momoko. I know he's a fool, and I know he does a lot of really stupid stuff, but this? As long as there's no cute girls waiting for a reward for him, he wouldn't go through all that trouble. And speaking of cute girls, I mean, he's got a thing for nearly every girl in our class, but Momoko has always been number one on his list. Given his personality, there was no way he would have said no to Momoko. On the contrary, he would have gladly done anything for her, don't you think? Yes, none of them would have objected to the idea, and that's what Momoko used to her advantage. By telling them that they were going to play a prank on us, she could get them to unknowingly help her achieve her true goal. So you're saying she purposely chose all of her victims as her accomplices, and then manipulated them into bringing forth their own demise. Exactly. He was looking at me like I was out of my mind, but I was confident in my theory. If Momoko was behind all this, it would have explained everything, even why Carmen hadn't told us the name of the real culprit. She'd known that no one would believe her, just like no one wanted to believe me right now. I know that Carmen's the only possible suspect in your eyes, which makes it hard to trust her words, but how about we give her a chance to explain herself? If anyone would know the truth, it's her, right? He didn't seem happy with this proposal, but since he didn't say anything against it, I simply took it as an okay, and turned to Carmen. Once again, everyone's attention shifted towards her as she began to explain. It's just as Shinpuku said. Hiro, Katoba, and I, we helped Momo fake her suicide. We helped her fool all of you into thinking she was dead. So, was it really supposed to be a prank then? Yes. Remember how I overheard you and Runa talking about your Halloween party at school? You two mentioned something about a prank to shock all of us, especially Shinpuku. I walked up to you guys and asked if I could be a part of it. In return, I promised not to tell anyone about your plans, but you did. You told Momoko. Yes, I told her the same day after school, on our way home. And then 2 days later, when we were at the park... Hey Carmen, you know I've been thinking about what you told me regarding Ryan and Runa's Halloween party. You know the whole thing about that prank? Yeah? What about it? How about we play a prank on them ourselves? Huh? Are you serious? Of course. They'll never expect that. I already have a really neat idea. Oh? I'll tell you later when we meet up with Hiro. Gonna have to involve him too. This is gonna be fun. Later that day, she told us her plan. Hiro was all for it, of course. He wanted to prove that he could pull off a much better prank than Rai. I wasn't sure about the whole thing, though. I mean, pretending that one of us died? I already thought that was a little mean when you proposed it. Then again, since you were planning the exact same thing, I thought it kind of served you right. And in the end, I just couldn't say no to Momo. I see. But how does Kotoba fit into all this? I thought Hiro hated him, and Momoko didn't really like him that much either, did she? So why'd you guys team up with him? Or was Raiko-chan wrong about that? No, she's right about that too. It surprised me as well when Momo told us she wanted to involve Kotoba. However, she said that we needed the help of at least one more person. We obviously couldn't ask you or Runa, and the others, especially Taiko and Shinpuku, would never have agreed to it. That only really left Kotoba, and well, he was easy to win over anyway. Just like Shinpuku said, he was ecstatic to be of help. Anyway, like I said, it was all supposed to be a prank. I had no idea of Momo's true intentions. I would have never thought that she wanted to kill Hiro, Kotoba, and even herself. And then blame everything on me? Yeah, that's really hard to believe. It did seem inconceivable. To imagine that Momoko had come up with such a devious plan, not only had she wanted to kill Hiro and Kotoba, she'd even manipulated them into helping her with that. And to top it all off, she tried to frame Carmen, her best friend, for it. This picture of her, the picture of a cruel, calculating murderer, simply didn't fit together with the picture of her that had slowly evolved over the course of the last few months, ever since the school year had started. I guess it was just like Carmen said earlier tonight. A book cannot be judged by its cover. Still, even though I knew it was the truth, I couldn't bring myself to believe it. And neither can I. I can't believe any of this, especially not the words of a suspect. But I'm telling the truth. That's what you say, but for all we know, you could be adapting to Raiko's little story in order to push the blame onto Momoko. Besides, words alone aren't going to convince me anyway. I want to see actual proof that Momoko is behind all this. Oh, you mean like you showed us actual proof that Carmen killed her? Ooh, don't worry. Unlike you, I do possess necessary evidence to support my claims. If you want me to, I can prove it to you right here, right now. But I want you to apologize to Carmen first. She might be innocent, you know. Or do you have any actual proof that she's the culprit? Taika didn't reply. He knew as well as I did that there was no such proof. I had to admit that at first glance it looked as though Carmen was the culprit, but in the end, that was also nothing more than an assumption. An assumption mostly based on the testimony of 3 witnesses. It had already been proven that these testimonies were anything but reliable, though. After all, none of us had been able to recognize the face of the person we had seen. Of course, there was still the fact that Carmen had been missing for a long period of time, but even though it did make her look suspicious, it didn't really prove anything either. And in the case of Momoko's death, you didn't even have anything at all. You said that, since Carmen probably did all those other bad things, she must have also killed Momoko. That was basically your line of reasoning, wasn't it? I have to admit it was rather unreasonable, so I apologize about that. It might be a poor excuse, but all I could think about was Kotoba. I was angry. I still am. And I vented all my anger on you, without actually thinking about the whole thing. Without having any actual proof of your guilt. That was wrong. Taiko? I mean, one of us has to be the culprit, and even now, you're the most likely candidate. At least to me. Still, I shouldn't have lashed out at you like that. You're our classmate, our friend. Precisely because I see you as such, it should be my duty to consider all possibilities before jumping to conclusions. I can't believe I let my emotions get the better of me like that. I'm really sorry, Carmen. But I've cooled down now, and I'm willing to listen. In the end, all I want to know is the truth. So how about this? Raiko-chan? Yeah? I want to know exactly what happened here tonight, so we're going through everything together from start to finish until we arrive at the truth. You claim to have reached it, but I'm still skeptical. Nevertheless, I'll give you a chance to explain yourself. Don't get me wrong though. As I said, I still think Carmen's the most likely suspect, but if you can prove me wrong, that's fine by me. I'm sure you have no objections? Sounds good to me. Let's do it. Alright, let's find out the truth then. All of us. Together. And this time, we'll be as thorough as we can be, so that we can get to a conclusion that doesn't leave any room for doubt. While he said this, Taiko looked at the others. He seemed a little surprised, but quickly gave him a collective nod, their eyes brimming with determination. Only Carmen kept looking around with a confused expression on her face, almost as though she was unsure whether she was dreaming or not. Don't worry, Carmen. I'll prove your innocence, I promise. Just hang in there a little longer. Shinpuku? Why? Why are you doing this for me? The look in her eyes, was it really that hard for her to believe? Well, I guess it was a little weird. I mean, she'd always treated me like crap, while I'd done my best to ignore her. Never in my wildest dreams would I have imagined there'd come a day when I'd try to help you like this. Still, I'm doing this because I know the truth. And because I cannot stand by and watch how someone is wrongly accused of a crime they did not commit. To be quite honest, that wasn't the whole truth. It wasn't just because I knew she was innocent. I felt like it was my duty to clear things up. I really wanted to help her. Genuinely help her. From the bottom of my heart. Of course, there was no way in hell I could tell you that. I didn't even really know myself why I felt that way. Maybe it was because all this felt so familiar. Because she reminded me of someone. Someone from long ago. Shinpoku, you're back. You're finally back. What was she talking about? I was back? When I ever been gone? I have no clue what's going on, but before I ponder this question any further... Hey, let's not waste any more time, okay? There's a lot of things to talk about. Now, I'd like to clear this up before the police arrive, so... Yes, of course. He was right. It would be best to have this solved before the police arrive, so we could give them the name of the real culprit. Besides, everyone seemed rather eager to hear my deductions, so... Here we go. Without further ado, it was time to solve all the mysteries we'd encountered tonight, and, in doing so, get to the bottom of this terrifying tragedy. Like Taiko had suggested, we began to go through tonight's events in chronological order. Not only did this make everything more comprehensible for the others, it also made it a lot easier to explain for me. Since everything had started with it, the first thing to talk about was the first power outage, of course. We now knew that it had been part of Rai's Halloween program, and that, due to being involved in the preparations, Carmen had known about it beforehand. Not only that, she'd mentioned it to Momoko, who had decided to utilize it for her own plan, at least according to my theory. However, whether I was right or not, one thing was for certain. During that blackout, Momoko had suddenly run up to the second floor, and in the only unlocked guest room, which posed our first big problem. This goddamn room on the second floor, why the heck was it unlocked anyways? It is indeed puzzling. Miyamoto-san and I made perfectly sure that every single guest room was locked. And, as you should know, only Miyamoto-san is in possession of the keys. No one but her could have unlocked it. Right, the question of who had unlocked the guest room. By now the answer was quite obvious. Hiro. At least to me. There was only one person who could have done it. Shirataki-san unlocked it? But how? And when? During dinner. Shortly after you left the table, Hiro came to us and... Very funny. Those lame vampire jokes are the best you can do. I'm disappointed. But what else should I expect from a host who doesn't even manage to unlock the toilets for her guests? Huh? What are you talking about? Do I have to spell it out? I need to take a piss, but the toilet's locked. It is? I could have sworn I unlocked it. Did I accidentally lock it again? Right, he borrowed my keys to unlock the restrooms on the first floor. Or so he said. Well, I was pretty sure I'd unlocked them, so... Did he lie to me? Yes, the restrooms are just an excuse to get your keys. In reality, he needed them to unlock the second floor guest room. And he can prove that? The room being open could still be an oversight by Rai and Runa. Or Rai was lying to us and purposefully left it open. Or she accidentally left it open and Runa consciously didn't say anything about it. Hey now, what exactly are you implying here? I'm merely listing various other possibilities to illustrate that it's not that simple. All I'm saying is that if we're going to assume things right off the bat, I'm not sure we should continue this. I had to admit he had a point. I presented the possibility that Hiro had unlocked the guest room, but it wasn't the only one. Since we had decided to go for the truth, I couldn't leave any room for doubt. Besides, I could prove that Hiro had been behind it. It certainly would have... If I could prove that Hiro had been behind it, it would certainly have boosted my theory's credibility. The question just was, how exactly was I going to do it? There was no direct way to prove that he'd used the keys in the guest room, so all I could do was show that Hiro had lied to us about the purpose of borrowing them. That Rai hadn't simply made a mistake, that she'd actually had unlocked the restrooms. But how? Witness? You have a witness? Well then tell us who it is. Mika. Mika? Aku. Mika only remembered herself just now, but she confirmed that Hiro had lied about the toilets, because Mika used them to pee shortly before Raiko and Nabaru arrived. That's right. Yes, when Runa had led us through the corridor to the dining hall, Mika had suddenly appeared from behind us, in order to startle us. After leaving the restrooms... Dude, I'm glad I took notes. Aku. Did Mika give you a good scare? He sure did. When the heck did you come from? Mika just came from the toilet where she saw you and thought to herself, they will make for some easy targets. That's what you said, right? Aku. Mika sneakily snuck up from behind after Roiko and Nobara passed the toilets. They had no idea what hit them. So the restrooms were already unlocked at the time. Aku. So unlocked, if you want to unlock them more, you would have needed to remove the door. That even rhymes, so it's gotta be true. And since that was long before Hiro borrowed the keys, it should make perfectly clear that he lied to us. Which is very suspicious, don't you think? If he didn't need the keys to unlock the restrooms, then it's highly likely he used them for something else. Okay, I admit that does sound like he could be the one who unlocked the guest room. That would also explain how Momoko had learned about it. Hiro could have simply told her. Although that simply wouldn't explain... That still wouldn't explain how she managed to find it during the blackout. Indeed. Even if Shiritaki-san had told Mori-san the room number, it was pitch black during the power outage. So how exactly did she find the correct room? She would not have been able to read the number plates. Maybe she just checked every room until she found the right one. No, she didn't have the time for that. She was being followed. Yes. Furthermore, once the lights went back on, they found her hanging from the ceiling with a rope around her neck. Whether she faked her death, actually committed suicide, or was murdered, somehow that rope had been attached to the ceiling and tied into a noose. All of it in complete darkness, as well as under a time limit. After all, it was unclear how long you and Shimpuku-san would need to switch the power back on. That was definitely true. The rope that had been used is the same one Momoko had worn around her waist, as part of the costume. Therefore, it couldn't have been prepared in advance by Hiro when he had unlocked the guest room. So how had Momoko conducted her fake suicide in absolute darkness? It certainly sounded too hard to pull off, unless... Maybe it actually wasn't pitch black inside the guest room. Maybe Momoko did have some light in there. Yes, it was something that had quickly let her know which guest room to enter, and which had given her enough light to prepare everything for her suicide. The candles. There was a candle on the glass table in that room. Remember? See? And it's melted down. A glass table? What about it? It's not so much about the table as it is about what's on it. What are you referring to, Shimpuku-san? There was a candle on top of it, burned halfway down. The molten wax literally glued it to the surface, which means that it must have been burning there for quite some time. I sincerely doubt that the resort staff would leave it there like that, so it must have been placed there tonight. Most likely by Hiro when he unlocked the room for Momoko. I see. If a lit candle was placed inside the room, and the door left open, it would have been easy to find during the power outage. And it might have provided enough light to prepare the rope and whatnot. So Shiritaki-san unlocked the guest room and provided a way for Mori-san to easily find it. I cannot help but wonder if all of this wasn't a little too risky. What if any of those following Mori-san had managed to catch up with her? Due to my kimono, I cannot run fast, especially not in the dark. So the same must have applied to Mori-san. I understand that you're accusing Shiritaki-san and Aiga-san of being her accomplices. But what if Kakai-san or Miyamoto-san had chased after her? Both of them are pretty fast runners. If they managed to catch up with her, the plan would have been an instant failure. I think she knew very well that that wasn't going to happen. How? First of all, thanks to her hearing about Rai's plans from Carmen, Momoko already knew that Baro-chan and I would be in the basement and wouldn't be able to follow her. We all know how obsessed Mika is with trying to startle me, so it was easy to guess she'd follow us. As for you, Taiko, there was a simple trick to make sure that you wouldn't leave the dining room hall. Wait, you don't mean... Kotoba? The moment the lights went out, he pretended to fall and hurt himself. That way he could make sure that you wouldn't leave his side. So that's why you were saying that Momoko needed him as an accomplice. Not only for that, but we'll get to the other reasons soon. In any case, the point here is that there was no way you would have left the dining hall to run after Momoko. But what about me? What if I'd followed her? Not to toot my own horn, but as Runa said, I'm a pretty fast runner. Well, she had a head start, and she knew where she needed to go. You, on the other hand, had no idea. Moreover, you needed to consider the following. Runa, what exactly did you do again before running upstairs? First to check the kitchen, then while Shiritaki-san went to the reception to look for Mori-san, he wanted Aiga-san and me to check the restaurant. Ah, yes, as her accomplices, Hiro and Carmen were there to slow you down and buy Momoko some time. She didn't need that much anyway. Once she was inside the guest room and had closed the door, she was safe. Yeah, after all, we were sure that the guest rooms were locked, so we never would have crossed our minds to check if Momoko was hiding in any of them. So far, I got to admit, everything's making sense. At least, I'm not seeing any big issues. However, now comes the important part. Momoko's suicide. You're saying that she faked it, but there are a few other possibilities. Hiro could have killed her, for example. After unlocking the guest room, he told Momoko about it, and somehow got her to head there during the blackout. She went into the specified room, closed the door, and then simply waited there for him. Of course, the others chased after her, but Runa couldn't keep up, so Hiro and Carmen went on ahead. When they arrived upstairs, he sent Carmen to the 3rd floor to search for Momoko, telling her that he would check the 2nd. Once Carmen was gone, it should have been easy for him to reach the guest room before Runa was able to catch up. He went inside, killed Momoko, and let it look like suicide. And then he only had to wait for the right moment to leave, since Runa was shouting Momoko's name while she was walking down the dark corridor. He should have been able to determine her position by her voice. After waiting for her to pass by, he used the darkness to his advantage and slipped out of the room unnoticed. He got some distance to the guest room and then waited for the lights to come back on. Once that happened, we just needed to pretend to find the corpse alongside the others. If I recall correctly, he was also the one shouting orders around, getting everyone busy. He probably didn't want anyone to take a closer look at her room, which is also why he kicked Carmen out, saying he wanted to be alone for a while. He needed to make sure that there was no evidence left behind, pointing to him as the killer. It would also explain the cut phone cord. He could have done it himself when he checked the reception for Momoko, most likely because he didn't want the police to be called too soon. Aku? While Mika has to admit that Taiko's theory sounds pretty nifty, it has one fatal flaw. Hiro was later killed himself. So wouldn't that mean that there were 2 killers? Exactly. And the other killer could only be one person, of course. Carmen. So now he's bringing up the very same theory I'd had come up with earlier, huh? The one about Hiro killing Momoko and then Carmen killing Hiro for revenge. The 2 of them had been alone up there for quite a while. Even though Carmen was supposed to have been waiting outside, she could have entered the guest room at any time, since Hiro wouldn't have been able to lock it without the keys. It was easy to imagine that she had caught him doing something suspicious, or by some other means had come to the conclusion that he had killed her best friend. And then she confronted him about it, whether it happened in the heat of the moment or because he consciously decided to take revenge. She ended up killing him, and that's the moment Raikun, Raiko-chan, and Nobara-chan witnessed when they went to check on them. So as you can see, it's perfectly possible that Hiro killed Momoko, but that he was then killed by Carmen. Curses, clearing Carmen of suspicion wasn't going to be that easy, huh? Like, getting me back down wasn't going to be that easy either. Even though his little theory seemed to make sense, I knew that wasn't what had actually occurred. I just somehow had to prove it to him. Little theory, bit condescending, don't you think? Anywho, I'd like to think that this makes a little more sense than what you've told us. After all, as I've said before, it's kind of hard to imagine that hanging from a ceiling with a rope around your neck could be faked. Aku. Mika has to agree. Momoko was definitely hanging. Her body was even swinging from side to side. No way Momoko could have faked that. Ah, that was right. When we discovered her, Momoko's body had been moving in this slight swinging motion, almost like a pendulum. I could certainly see why the others had trouble believing she'd faked her death, but she had. And I can prove it to them now. If I could prove it to them now, there'd be no reason left for them not to consider my theory a legitimate possibility. So, I admit that this was probably the trickiest part of Momoko's plan. If any of us had noticed something was off, it would have ruined everything. And that's precisely why she needed Carmen and Hiro as her accomplices. Remember what we could actually see when we arrived at the guest room? Hiro and Carmen were already standing right in front of their door, basically blocking the entrance. They blocked out most of the view with their capes, so all we got to see was Momoko's upper body. For all we know, she could have been standing on some kind of pedestal. What? That's your explanation? She just stood on something? Are you kidding me? It almost sounds too simple, wouldn't you think? That she would have been... What would she have been standing on anyway? The glass table, it had footprints on it, for Christ's sake. That glass table again? The candle was not the only thing I found on top of it. There were also footprints, or sandal prints to be precise. The only 2 people wearing sandals here tonight were Momoko and Runa, since they were part of their costumes. So only one of them could have left them there. And you're saying it was Momoko when she climbed on top of it in order to fake your suicide. Precisely. The table is of rather low height, similar to the dinner tables around here, I'd say. Now imagine Momoko standing on top of it. Of course, this would have been extremely obvious, but don't forget that Hiro and Carmen were purposely blocking the view. So since we couldn't see the lower half of Momoko's body, it appeared as though she was levitating slightly above the ground. I guess so. There's also one other thing I should probably mention. The prints left by her forefeet were much clearer than those left by the rest of her feet. She was standing on her tippy toes. Her weight was resting solely on her forefeet, meaning she was standing on her toes for a while. But why? Because of the nose. If it was purposely hanging a little high, and she had to get on her toes in order to put her head through it, it would look like the rope was pulling at her neck. The swinging motion could have been easily simulated with careful movements of her body. Since we only got to see the upper half of it, no one would have noticed anything. And that's how you can fake hanging yourself? But wait a sec. What if someone were just to peek through Carmen and Hiro's legs? They would have clearly seen the table. No, they wouldn't have. Eh? First of all, since the table is made entirely of glass, it's hard to see in a dark room. And as you might recall, the guest room itself was pitch black. Furthermore, Hiro and Carmen were both wearing capes. Pretty long capes, actually. So long, in fact, they almost touched the floor. I have to admit it, I was unable to see anything through their legs. After I collapsed to my knees, I could not peek further into the room because Aiga-san and Shiratake-san's capes blocked almost the entire view. And what little I could see was obscured by darkness. Therefore, I cannot say whether Mori-san was standing on anything or not. As for the rest of us, we were naturally quite shocked, and our attention was mainly drawn to Momoko's face. Or rather, the rope around her neck. No one cared about her feet, and we really didn't get enough time to look at anything else anyway. After letting us merely catch a glimpse at her... Maybe it's not too late. We have to get her down. Now. Yeah, you're right. You there. Go call an ambulance, and tell Rai what happened to you. She's still downstairs in the dining hall. Get her quick. They made sure to quickly divert our attention and get rid of us, so that we didn't get a chance to notice something was off. Isn't that so, Carmen? Yes, you're absolutely right. Since you're so sharp, we sent you and Nabara away to call an ambulance. We would have just told Mika and Runa to wait outside, but luckily for us, Runa was so shocked that we could hear Mika taking care of her. That made everything a lot easier. Hiro and I quickly entered the room and closed the door behind us, of course. A few moments later, I left by myself to tell the others Momoko was dead. And they simply bought it. They got quiet again as everyone sunk deep into thought, processing what they just heard, and pondering whether or not it could be true. While I could see it was probably a little hard to swallow, I had to at least admit now that Momoko faking her suicide was a possibility. The footprints on the glass table certainly indicated as much. I don't know about that. They could have also been left there when Momoko committed actual suicide. She simply could have used the table as a platform to jump from. The footprints can't really be seen as conclusive proof that she faked it. The guy sure was persistent, wasn't he? Unfortunately, he was right. Besides, even if I managed to prove it to be a possibility, that wasn't quite good enough. If she'd used it to commit actual suicide, she wouldn't have been able to move it back to the edge of the room, would she? If I couldn't prove that it actually happened that way, all of this was pointless. Anyhow, I don't think discussing this point will get us any further for now, so let's move on. What exactly happened next? Well, while Raiko-chan and I were looking for a phone, we met up with Rai and went to reception. That's when we realised the phone cord was cut. So that was Hiro's work now, or what? Because if Raiko-chan's theory is true, and he thought they were just going to play a prank, why exactly would he do that? Isn't that going a bit too far for a prank? No. Even if he thought it was just going to be a prank, he still had to do it. Huh? He sent us to call for an ambulance, but even if he hadn't, one of us would have tried calling one, as well as our parents. However, if we'd done that, we would have caused all sorts of trouble. Oh yeah. I doubt they would have been too thrilled to learn that it was just a prank after coming all the way out here. Yeah. Hiro didn't want a mere prank to go out of proportion like that. Why didn't he just unplug the cord though? Because we could have just plugged it back in? That literally wouldn't have cut it. Okay, guess that's true. But wait, the reception phone was obviously our first choice, but it's not like the only one in the entire resort. And that's why there was another blackout, to prevent us from using any of the other phones. But it took a while till the second blackout actually occurred. What if we'd gone straight to the manager's office, for example? But we didn't, because Mika and Runa came downstairs to tell us about Momoko's death. Naturally, we immediately went to the second floor to take a look for ourselves, which gave a certain someone more than enough time to turn the power off before any of us could see the other phones. And by now it should have been obvious to everyone who that certain someone had been. Oh shit, it was Kotoba, wasn't it? I guess I can't deny it anymore. Kotoba obviously lied to me. Not only once, but twice. First about hurting himself, and then about going to the restrooms. So that's the other reason Momoko needed an accomplice, huh? Yeah. He went into the breaker room, locked the window, pushed the closet in front of the door, and turned the power off. And then he just waited down there. All for Momoko. Without realizing she was planning to kill him soon. Okay, that explains why we couldn't enter the breaker room, but there's something I've been wondering about. If all Kotoba did was push the closet in front of the door, I still should have been able to use my keys. So why didn't they fit into the lock? I think I know the answer to that now. Again, it's really simple. Alright, we're going to wrap this one up here, because I think it's going to go on for quite a long time. So we're going to break this into 2 parts. And we will finish this one up in the next one. Sorry to cliffhanger you like that. But otherwise it's going to be a 2-hour long episode. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for getting out for me, and I'll see you in the next one.